Long before the hunter became a pattern of stars, Orion was spoken of as a child born near the restless sea. In some tales, Poseidon favored him from birth. In others, the earth itself seemed to lend him size and strength, shaping him larger than ordinary men. The people of Boeotia remembered him as a boy who grew too quickly for doorways, who could lift fishing nets soaked with seawater, and who stared at the horizon as if the world beyond it were calling his name. Orion loved the coast before he loved the hunt. He learned the moods of waves, the taste of storm wind, and the way sailors read the sky before trusting the dark. At night, while others slept, he watched the constellations move over the water and wondered why the heavens seemed so full of stories. He did not know then that one day man would look upward and tell his story there too. As Orion grew, the wilderness became his second home. He learned to kneel in wet soil and read the marks left by hooves, claws, and bare feet. He could tell whether a deer had passed in fear or calm, whether a wolf pack was hungry, and whether a wounded boar had turned toward water or deeper forest. Older hunters laughed at first when the young giant followed broken twigs and crushed grass as if they were written words. They stopped laughing when he returned before sunset with the exact beast he had named that morning. Yet his teachers warned him carefully. A hunter survives not by strength alone, but by patience. The forest is older than pride. The animal that flees is not weaker, it is only trying to live. Orion listened, but prey soon gathered around him like summer heat. Every successful hunt made the warning sound smaller. By the time Orion became a man, his name traveled faster than he did. Shepherds spoke of him when wolves vanished from mountain passes. Farmers praised him when boars no longer ruined their fields. Sailors claimed they had seen him wading through deep water with only his shoulders above the waves, as if Poseidon had granted him a strange freedom over the sea. Children repeated stories of his bow, his spear, his hounds, and his stride that covered the land like a moving tower. Orion did not seek a throne. He sought the open world. He crossed valleys where temples had fallen into ivy, slept beside rivers under cold stars, and followed rumors of monsters from village to village. Each road gave him another victory. Each victory gave him another song. And songs, when sung too often, can become dangerous. They teach a man to hear only his own greatness. Orion came at last to Chios, an island of bright vineyards, steep hills, and harbors crowded with ships. The people there had suffered under wild beasts that came down from the mountains after dusk. Wolves took lambs from pens. Boars destroyed vines. A lion was said to drink from the village wells at night, leaving prints large enough to terrify even armed men. When Orion arrived, King Oenopion welcomed him with public gratitude and private calculation. The king saw at once that the hunter was useful. A man who could clear the island of beasts could make the people grateful to the throne again. But Oenopion also saw danger. The crowd cheered Orion too loudly. Women leaned from balconies to glimpse him. Soldiers measured themselves against him and looked away. A hero in another man's kingdom can become a shadow over the crown. In the palace of Chios, Orion first saw Merope. She was the daughter of Oenopion, and the court spoke of her beauty as if it were part of the island's wealth. But Orion noticed something quieter. Merope did not stare at him like the others. She listened more than she spoke. When musicians played at dinner, her eyes followed the shadows on the wall. When men praised Orion's strength, she asked whether the villages were truly safe. That question stayed with him. For the first time, Orion wanted to be more than admired. He wanted to be understood. He began to bring back proof of his hunts, not for the shouting crowds, but for the calm glance of the princess beneath the marble columns. Love entered the story gently, but Greek myths rarely allowed gentleness to remain untouched. Oenopion noticed the change and feared it. The king could not forbid Orion openly. The island needed the hunter, and the people praised him as if he were sent by the gods. So Oenopion offered a promise wrapped around a delay. If Orion cleared Chios of every dangerous beast, then he might be given Merope's hand. Orion accepted at once. He did not hear the trap inside the words. He heard only the possibility of earning what he desired. He rode into the hills before dawn, crossed ravines after sunset, and followed blood trails into caves where even soldiers refused to go. He returned with proof again and again: wolf hides, broken tusks, lion claws, and villages that could sleep without fear. The more Orion succeeded, the more Oenopion's smile hardened. The hunts of Chios became legends of their own. Orion tracked a boar through vineyard terraces during a storm that turned the soil to red mud. He drove wolves from the northern cliffs where shepherds had stopped grazing their flocks. He followed the lion of the wells into a narrow cave and emerged at sunrise with torn arms and the beast's mane dark with dust. Each victory made the island safer. Each victory made the people louder. Children ran behind him in the streets. Old men poured wine in his honor. Mothers blessed his name at doorways. And Merope, though careful beneath her father's eyes, began to smile when Orion returned alive. The king had asked for impossible labors, and Orion had made them possible. That was when gratitude turned to fear. When the final beast was slain, Oenopion ordered a feast. The palace filled with music, torches, roasted meat, and wine dark as night. The people expected a marriage promise to be honored. Orion expected it too. He sat beneath painted ceilings, wearing fresh bandages from his last hunt, while Merope waited behind her attendants with a face no longer calm. Oenopion rose and praised the hunter before the court. He spoke of courage, strength, service, and the gratitude of Chios. Then his words shifted. The gods must be consulted. The omens must be read. The season was not right. A king's daughter could not be given in haste. The hall continued celebrating, but Orion heard only the sound of a door closing. Wine did not create his anger. It only loosened what humiliation had already sharpened. The poets disagree about the exact crime that followed, but all agree the story darkened. Oenopion had Orion seized in the night. When the hunter woke, the palace was gone. The feast was gone. Merope was gone. He lay on the shore with sand beneath his hands and the sea speaking beside him. His sight had been taken. The great tracker who could read the ground like scripture could no longer see a single footprint. He reached for his bow and found only emptiness. He called out, but the voices that answered were gulls and waves. In that first hour of blindness, Orion understood a kind of fear he had never learned from beasts. Darkness was no longer the night around him. It had entered him and closed the world. Orion did not die on the shore. He rose because pride had not left him, and because somewhere beneath pride there was still will. An oracle's rumor reached him through sailors. Only the light of Helios, the sun who sees all things, could restore what darkness had taken. So Orion turned east. He moved along coast roads by sound and touch, guided by the smell of salt, the warmth of morning on one side of his face, and the kindness or fear of strangers. Some fled when they recognized him. Others gave him water. A blind giant walking alone beneath the sky became a story before the story had even ended. For the first time, Orion could not conquer the road. He had to endure it step by step. The road led Orion to the forge of Hephaestus. There, beneath volcanic stone, bronze glowed like captive sunlight. Hammers rang through chambers full of sparks, bellows breathed like sleeping monsters, and unfinished wonders stood in shadow. Hephaestus, lame and powerful, listened to Orion's story without laughter. The smith god understood humiliation. Olympus had not always been kind to him. He did not restore Orion's sight himself, but he gave the hunter help. A young servant was placed upon Orion's shoulders to guide him toward the sunrise. The boy would become his eyes until Helios appeared. Orion, who had once trusted only his own strength, now had to trust a voice above him. That lesson was almost as difficult as the journey itself. At last, Orion reached the eastern edge of the world. The sea before him turned gold before the sun appeared. The boy on his shoulders told him when to stand still, when to lift his face, and when the chariot of Helios rose from the water. Then light touched Orion's ruined eyes. At first there was pain. Then brightness. Then shapes returning slowly from the dark. The horizon unfolded. Clouds became clouds again. The sea burned with color, and the boy's small hands trembled against Orion's head as the giant began to weep. His sight had returned, but restoration is not the same as wisdom. Orion had looked into helplessness and survived it, yet the old hunger for greatness remained. After his sight returned, Orion wandered to Crete, where forests climbed the mountains and moonlight silvered the leaves. There he met Artemis. She came through the trees with bow in hand, followed by hounds and maidens, her presence colder and clearer than any courtly praise. Artemis did not care that kings had honored Orion. She did not ask how many beasts he had killed to win applause. She watched how he moved, how he placed his feet, how he held his breath before loosing an arrow. For once, Orion was not admired loudly. He was measured silently. That silence drew him closer than praise ever had. Soon the hunter and the goddess walked the same paths beneath the moon. The hunts of Orion and Artemis became tales whispered beside winter fires. They crossed ridges before dawn and followed deer tracks through frost. They slept beneath separate trees while the hounds guarded the clearing. Sometimes they spoke of hunting, sometimes of nothing at all. Artemis, who loved freedom above all things, found in Orion someone who could walk far without asking her to become less than herself. Some later poets imagined love between them. Others called it friendship, rare and dangerous because it joined mortal and divine too closely. Whatever name it carried, the bond unsettled Olympus. Gods forgive many things, but they rarely forgive a mortal who seems to stand near their equal. Apollo watched from the bright heights of Olympus. He was the god of music, prophecy, healing, and the sun's clear order. To him, Orion seemed too large, too praised, too close to Artemis. Perhaps Apollo feared his sister would be wounded by mortal affection. Perhaps he resented the hunter. Perhaps he saw a future that disturbed him and called his jealousy wisdom. The myths do not agree, and that uncertainty is part of their power. Apollo did not strike at once. Gods often prefer indirect roads. He waited, listened, and watched for a weakness already growing inside Orion, the belief that no creature of earth could truly humble him. A god needs only a crack when pride has already opened the door. One day, after a long season of successful hunts, Orion spoke too proudly beneath the open sky. He claimed that no beast on earth could defeat him. Some versions say he declared he would kill every wild creature if he wished. The words may have been spoken in laughter. They may have been meant only to impress. But the earth does not judge arrogance by whether a man calls it jest. Birds went silent in the trees. The wind dropped. Far below roots, caves, and buried bones, Gaia heard the boast. To Orion, it was confidence. To Gaia, it was a threat against the living world she had made. The earth is patient, but patience is not weakness. Gaia answered with a creature almost insulting in its beginning. A scorpion crawled from cracked soil beneath a red evening sky. At first it seemed small enough for a sandal to crush. Then it grew. Its shell darkened like iron. Its claws opened with the sound of stones grinding together. Its tail curved above its body, carrying venom born from the anger of the earth. The creature did not roar. It did not need to. It followed Orion's trail across dust, grass, and stone. The hunter who had claimed mastery over every beast became the hunted. Every mark he left behind was read by something older than his pride. This was Gaia's answer, not a giant, not a dragon, but the low creature he had never thought to fear. Orion first saw the scorpion between rocks at sunset. He laughed because pride often laughs just before it learns. He drew his bow and fired. The arrow struck the shell and shattered. He fired again. Another splintered uselessly. The hounds backed away with low whines, refusing to charge. The scorpion advanced without hurry. Orion changed weapons. Spear, knife, stone, strength, everything that had served him before seemed suddenly small. The creature's armor turned aside his attacks, and its tail moved with patient precision. For the first time since blindness, Orion felt fear return. This time the darkness was not inside his eyes. It was the knowledge that the world had finally produced something his strength could not command. Here the old singers part ways. Some say the scorpion struck Orion, and its venom brought the great hunter down upon the earth he had insulted. Some say Orion fled across the sea, using Poseidon's gift to walk through waves while the scorpion waited on the shore. Others say Apollo saw his chance and wove another ending altogether. Greek myths often preserve several truths at once. They do not behave like court records. They behave like memory, gathering sorrow from different firesides. What every version agrees upon is this: Orion could not escape consequence. Whether by Gaia's creature or Apollo's deception, the hunter's life had moved beyond triumph and into tragedy. In the version told with the greatest sorrow, Apollo found Artemis beside the sea. Far out upon the water, a dark shape moved near the horizon. Apollo challenged his sister's skill. Could she strike that distant mark? Artemis, confident in an aim that had never failed, lifted her silver bow. She did not know the shape was Orion. The arrow flew over the shining water. It crossed the path of sunlight, silent and perfect, and vanished into the distant figure. Apollo said nothing as the sea carried fate toward the shore. The cruelty of the moment lay in its simplicity. Artemis had done what she did best, and that was how she lost him. When the body washed ashore, Artemis understood. The hunter who had walked beside her through silent forests lay still in the sand. The bow that had once moved so easily in his hands rested beyond his reach. No beast roared. No crowd cheered. No king watched from a throne. Only the sea moved, touching the shore as if nothing in the world had changed. Artemis knelt beside Orion, and grief entered a goddess who had always belonged to distance. Apollo's victory, if victory is the right word, became a silence he could never turn into music. The scorpion's legend remained. Gaia's warning remained. But on that shore, all explanations were smaller than loss. Artemis asked Zeus that Orion not vanish completely. Zeus, who had seen many heroes rise and fall, understood that the sky was more than decoration. It was memory made visible. He placed Orion among the stars with his belt shining in 3 clear lights, his shoulders broad, his weapon lifted, his form recognizable to sailors, shepherds, and children across the ages. The hunter became a constellation. But the gift was not simple honor. It was also a warning. Orion's brightness carried his courage, his beauty, his skill, and his pride. The heavens did not erase his flaws. They preserved them, because a myth without danger teaches nothing. So Orion rose, brilliant and wounded, above the winter world. Scorpion was given a place in the heavens too. It became Scorpius, a curved shape of red fire rising in another season. Yet the two enemies were not placed side by side. When Scorpius climbs the summer sky, Orion sinks away. When Orion returns in winter, the Scorpion is gone. The ancient Greeks saw this movement and found a story inside it. The chase never ends, but the battle never finishes. This is one of the gentlest mercies of the myth. The sky keeps hunter and scorpion apart. Their conflict becomes rhythm instead of destruction, a pattern by which mortals can understand the turning year. Tragedy becomes astronomy. Astronomy becomes story. Of all Orion's stars, the belt became the easiest to remember. 3 bright points in a straight line. Simple enough for a child. Clear enough for a sailor. Reliable enough for winter travelers crossing dark roads. Across centuries, people lifted their eyes and found those 3 lights before they knew the full sorrow behind them. To the Greeks, they marked the body of a hunter. To later cultures, they became other figures, other symbols, other guides. But in the old Greek story, Orion's belt carried the strange comfort of recognition. A human life had ended. A pattern remained. Perhaps this is why constellations matter. They do not return the dead, but they give memory a shape that can be found again. Every winter, Orion rises again. He appears over dark forests, cold seas, sleeping villages, and mountains covered with snow. He no longer hunts the beasts of Chios. He no longer walks beside Merope, Artemis, or the shouting crowds that once praised him. He belongs to the heavens now, where triumph and sorrow shine with the same cold light. Look for him on a clear winter night and the old myth returns. There is the hunter. There is the belt. Somewhere beyond the season, Scorpius waits. And between them turns the world of mortals, still telling stories to make sense of pride, love, punishment, and remembrance. Orion's life became a warning, but also a wonder. For as long as winter stars rise, the hunter still walks across the dark.